Hi, I'm Jimmy Rhee, former Cabinet Secretary for Governor Hogan in his administration on economic issues.
Growing up as the son of the late Grandmaster Jim Rhee, who left a lasting legacy as a senior figure in the Korean-American Taekwondo community in the United States, how did your father's teaching influence your value and the choices you have made in life?
Yeah, my father's name, Jun Rhee, he's the person who brought Korean Taekwondo to the US. When I was growing up, we had people like Bruce Lee, Lee So-ryung, Chuck Norris, Muhammad Ali. They used to visit our house every summer, and they and my father would work out. So I learned a lot from them, okay? And one thing that really stood out, whether it's Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, or my father, is that they were leaders, okay? They set their own narrative. No one's gonna tell them what to do or what to say. They had their own mindset, okay? They follow their own story. Very important part as a Korean American, being a minority, having your own mindset. And second thing is, they had big, bold ideas, okay? They dreamt big. They wanted to change the world, okay? It's not about, I want to get more pay. That's not about paycheck. It's about changing the world. And of course, as a young person, a young kid, I thought they were a little crazy, okay? But looking back, they were unique individuals, okay? You have to be like that. And I would say they were very passionate people. They work out. When Bruce Lee used to visit our house, he and my father would work out 10 hours a day. The whole house would shake until 2 o'clock in the morning. And I used to complain to my mother because my bedroom was in the basement. Upstairs going boom, 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 boom. I couldn't go to sleep. So next morning I go to my mother and saying, Mom, when is that guy going back home? You know, I'm complaining, right? So when my father died, he passed away 8 years ago. And we had Bruce Lee's wife, Linda Lee, and Chuck Norris came to eulogize my father. And Linda recollected that story and he told the crowd that how Jimmy was. He used to complain all the time and Bruce would visit, you know, my father, June. And so they're very passionate. You know, I think there's a saying that when you are like one step ahead of people, they call you really smart. When you're 2 steps ahead of people, they say you're crazy. I think they were somewhere in between, right? Very passionate at what they do. And that's what got them to become experts in their field and excel in what they do. And you know, if there's one more thing is that they're very innovative. They're constantly thinking new ways of doing things. Just look at my father. Korean Taekwondo, what they call pumse, used to be just following form. But one day my father was watching figure skating Olympics. I was sitting next to him and all of a sudden the telephone rang. So he said, turn down the volume, okay, on TV. So I did. And he got through with this telephone conversation, hung up. And he told me, you know, I was watching figure skating without music. It wasn't very exciting. So what did he do? He combined classical music and Taekwondo pumse. So that's what there was the beginning of all the musical form, okay, as an example. So he had many things like that, life skills, okay. You cannot make money, make a living out of teaching people how to fight. So he said, what about things that we instilled in people, young people, self-confidence, discipline, all these things are very important in life, okay? So think about this. To be very good in Taekwondo, you gotta be quick, you gotta have a balance, you gotta be flexible, you have a, there's a lot of things that are needed. But if you transfer that to real life, being quick in Taekwondo is important, to block and react. But being quick in life is also important. When you see an opportunity, you better be quick to capture that opportunity, okay? Being flexible in Taekwondo is important if you're gonna kick high, right? But being flexible in mindset is also very important in life because you don't wanna be rigid. You wanna be flexible, embrace different ideas. So all those things contributed to influencing me who I am today, simply put.
What is your position of the Maryland state government? What did you see as the most important responsible of that position?
I was appointed by Larry Hogan prior to that, I was also appointed by Virginia governor to run international trade and investment as Assistant Secretary of Commerce Department. And years passed by, and I had got this call from Larry Hogan, and he appointed me as one of his cabinet secretaries. It's related to economic development. The office is called Governor's Office of Small, Minority, and Women Business Affairs. In Maryland, you have 620,000 small businesses. It was under my umbrella to make sure that I create the environment, okay, that they could prosper. Now, so my office is similar to federal government's SBA, Small Business Administration. Now, why was it? This was a critically important job because practically everybody has a small business. There are 40 million small businesses in the US. Less than 1% is considered as big business. 99.9% practically, they are small businesses, okay? Owned by somebody like your friend's mother or friend's father and so on, right? And it is a very, very important job because they need to prosper. But one thing that drove me is this. Big businesses have advantage for reasons we know. Little businesses don't, okay? So I used to refer to what Dr. Martin Luther King used to say. He said there are two sets of laws in our society. One that's made by you know who, him, and then one that we make. And as long as those two sets of laws are not compatible with each other, we would not have justice in our society. Right now, between those two laws, there's a gap, big gap, and everybody knows that gap exists. So my job at the time was, how do I close that gap on economic development so small businesses could survive? So I thought, let me work the forest, the macro stuff, improve taxes and fees, improve regulations, improve infrastructure such as highways and waterways and whatever, telecommunications. Because in this era of connectivity, small businesses gain strength by connecting all the interdependent factors. So those three things were very important in the forest so that all trees receive sunlight and prosper, right? But that's macro. Micro is, how do I help each tree? And when I analyzed each tree, I felt they all needed three things. And I used to refer to this as 3 pillars of success and had my staff to go out there and do seminars and events based on those 3 things. First thing was your business competency. How good are you at what you're doing? Because if you're not good at what you do, you're gonna compete in price. And there's always somebody cheaper than you are, okay? You don't want to go there. Miserable place to be, okay? You want to be best at what you do, so increase the value of what you do. Second is access to capital, money, because money to business is like blood to our body, without which you cannot sustain, you cannot live. I don't care how good you are in business, without money, you're not going to go very far. So I had to take care of that issue. And then third pillar was, there are laws that are constantly changing, regulations, statutes, and so on. Businesses need to understand what laws change so they can position their business so there's a wind behind them to help them go forward, tailwind, rather than facing headwind against them because, oops, new regulations and I'm not supposed to be doing this. You don't want that. So those 3 things were very important part. And why did I think that way? Because when you really think about it, this is something that most people don't think about, is what is the market that we say, free market, that the businesses compete, Adam Smith, invisible hand will take care of everything. Well, it doesn't always work that way. Market it did not come from God. It did not come from nature. We created the market. So if we created the market, it ought to reflect the values that we think is important. And right now, the gap that Dr. King spoke of has widened rather than narrow. So yeah, that's what I used to do, simply put. And that was the most important issue that I wanted to close the gap.
As a Korean American 1.5 generation individual, what experience the most to shape your identity and influenced your growth as a leader navigating both immigrant and mainstream society?
I think it goes back to how I grew up in South Korea. When I was born there, it wasn't too long after the Korean War ended. So whole Korea was the broken infrastructure, broken family, broken spirit, That was a common thing, okay? It was a very poor country. I think Korea ranked on per capita income 145th out of 148 countries that existed then. Since then, country has prospered, as we know, right? But I grew up in the poor neighborhood, poor environment, right? So when I first came to the US and I had a taste of potato chips and Coca-Cola, I thought I died and went to heaven, okay? I never had anything like that, right? So I thought I came to heaven. But then life in America was not that easy either. New language, new everything. So I had a very difficult time adjusting. I rebelled. I wasn't always focused on studying and the typical thing. But fortunately, because of Taekwondo, we met a lot of people. And fortunately, because of Taekwondo, I met a lot of wonderful people who taught me many things. I think one of the things that I could look back and say, that really one lesson influenced me the most is that the concept of we versus I. When I say we is a mainstream, I is minority community, it's just us. Well, we cannot survive as a part of the whole. We have to be part of the whole, then let's mix it, right? So that we versus I was a very important part, and this wonderful people that I met said, Jimmy, doesn't matter you are Korean or not. You have a role to play in our society. Open it up. We connect the I to we. Very important part. And second lesson that I've learned was they taught me to be curious. Okay? They taught me the system. As an example, just as you have a Windows running a computer because it's operating system. What is the operating system that runs our society? The market, everything. It's capitalism. When you take out the ISM-ism, it's capital. Okay? It's about this, right? And they taught me what to do to survive and do well in this system because it's a machine, it's a system, right? And everything has repeating pattern. And you can watch it, study it, and you can learn the repeating pattern and put yourself in a very advantageous position. So I've learned that, to be curious and so on, right? But then they also taught me many, such as like, you need to have a goal, set a goal. You need to know what you want, okay? If someone were to ask me in an elevator, what do you want to be when you grow up? I have to know, this is what I want. You gotta know what you want. If you have to think about it for 5 seconds, that means you didn't think about it before, right? Know exactly what you want, but also think about what is true out there in reality. You know, you cannot have a myopic, distorted vision of what's true out there. You gotta know the real stuff. Get what you want within the context of what is true out there. It should be very simple. That goal has to be there, right? And I think that's a very important part, having that goal. And I think the most important part is, though, they taught me, you gotta have your own map, your own philosophy that you can rely on, not follow somebody else. So I used to believe and created my own matrix and something in vertical. I created 3 things for me. First, God. I don't know who God is. I've never met him, okay? He never called me. But I know that I did not make myself. So there has to be higher power, okay? And 2, family. If you're an average person like me, family is me, my wife, and kids, and so on. But if you're a big person like Martin Luther King or somebody, Gandhi, family is whole country. You decide who your family is. And 3 is what I call body of knowledge. In our family, we use a lot of acronym, BOK, BOK, body of knowledge. And that is simply this. Knowledge here is not enough. You got a lot of people behind bars in prison, really smart, but they have nothing here. But then everything here doesn't do you any good. You can't help other people. You got a lot of people who are excessively attached to their religious doctrine. They pray every day, God willing this, God willing that, right? That doesn't do any good. You got to have a balanced body of knowledge. So that was my 3 things, right? And then I taught my kids that. And then when they become a little bit older, I taught them the horizontal thing. In our family, we call it SPIF. SPIEF. There's a SPIF in God, there's a SPIF in family, there's a SPIF on body of knowledge. What do I mean by that? I just give you one example. S stands for spiritual. P is physical. I is intellectual. E is emotional. F is financial. If there's an imbalance on any one of these areas, you're going to be unhappy. There's a stress in your life. You want to avoid that. So what do you mean by balance? Well, just take a look at the S, spiritual. Yeah, you can go to church, believe, do good things, get saved, religious experience. Very important part. But at the same time, you also want to learn the theology, historic Jesus as an example, okay? You have to understand how this thing all emanated. How did it all got started? Who wrote the book of synopsis? Whether it's Luke, John, Matthew. And when, why, who, and what language? How was the translation done? And when you have that, you have two conflicting information, plus and minus. But to me, it's very important that you maintain the balance in between. It's like riding a bicycle. You stop learning, you stop thinking about it, you fall one direction or another, right? So maintaining that two contrasting information on SPIEF will be a very important part. And another example is intellectual. SPI, intellectual, emotional. Intellectual part is a very important part because what is your truth, right? When I was 6 years old, the truth was going to Disney World. As a 60-year-old person, the truth is American Association of Retired People, AARP. The truth changes. Truth is nothing more than current limitation of your understanding. So if you can put more information, more learning into the truth bucket, your truth expands. So even the truth, intellectual part is you never know enough. The more you know, more you ought to know that you don't know anything. And I think having that kind of balance is a very important philosophy to have. So yeah, they helped me to create that map. So that's the map that I live by, okay, even today.
So while serving as a bridge between minority communities and the government, what were the greatest challenges you faced and what lessons did you learn from those experiences?
Having that political appointment, it's not an easy job. Every day is a problem. If there's no problem, that's a problem. Especially in states like Maryland, which has a very diverse demographics. 35% of the population are African Americans, about 12-13% Asians, about 20% Latinos, and then the rest of them Caucasians. It's a very diverse state. So that when you look at them from the ethnic basis, whether you look at it from the income, education, gender, religion, when you look at it from all those perspectives, everybody has different needs. Everybody has different expectations, problems, and so on. You help one, the other one didn't get help. Always zero-sum game. And that was very frustrating because you couldn't satisfy everybody. And second thing, the challenge was that I think in our society that people don't realize this, but this discrimination still exists. There's a bias, prejudice, discrimination, some systemic, some individual basis. It exists, okay? And so, of course, you can say, you know what? I am prejudiced because if you have no prejudice, you have no taste in life, okay? But you know what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about the negative aspect of being biased and prejudice and so on. Because if you look at Baltimore City, there is something called red line. Red line used to be where the banks would draw a line around poor neighborhood and saying, we're not going to do any business, no lending money, anybody who's inside that line, invisible line. And they were typically African Americans. It existed. But today, if you look at SBA just announced that they will no longer make loans to small businesses if that business is owned by someone who is not citizen, but only has permanent residency, green card, no more loans. And news like that hurts me because when you look back, when my father first came to this country to open up a karate school, taekwondo school, he needed money, okay? Of course, Koreans do what they call, ge, but then there weren't that many Koreans to do that. They were not like Koreans today, where you hear a bunch of Korean restaurants and a lot of Koreans. Back then, there weren't that many Koreans to do that, right? And so he had to borrow money from SBA. And he wasn't yet a citizen. Today, he would not be able to borrow money. So imagine the impact that he made with the money that he got from SBA. He made a global impact. Maybe hundreds of millions of people from his philosophy and what Taekwondo can be. But today, he could not. And things like that really, I think, bothers me, okay? That we are off track right now, right? We need to come back somehow, right? What that will take, I am not really sure, but that kind of problem exists today. What kind of lessons have I learned from things like this is that we can complain. I mean, look at young people today. Young people don't trust the institution, okay? And I don't blame them because people generally don't trust government anyway because it has not done anything for people. Young people have faced nothing but crisis after crisis, from COVID lockdown, okay, to inflation. They can't buy a house. They can't pay for health care. Even eggs are expensive today. They're not going to trust the government. There's no wonder why they voted for Mandami in New York, okay, who is a socialist kind of thinking. Because young people don't trust the capitalism anymore, right? Something is wrong. We need to reset our operating system called capitalism to benefit everybody. And so there's a lot of lessons to be learned, but one core lesson that I learned is simply this. We can talk about it. You can talk all you want, but don't talk your talk. You got to walk your talk at some point. Not somebody else, you yourself. You have to walk your talk. Take action on it. Go from complaint, go from protest to policies. Just look at Maryland. We got 188 legislators. 1/3 of that, more than 67 of them, are African Americans. Asians, including Indians and everybody else, Koreans, Chinese, I believe only 6 or 7. So if you are changing from complaint to policies, you want to work with 6 votes or you want to work with 6 plus 67. What does that mean? That means we as smaller minority, we got to go to African American community and say, hey, we embrace you. Let's work together, okay? We thank you for what you've done in the civil rights movement, which we have also benefited from. Not criticizing them because they have different color and different attitude, different culture. No, we need to open up and work with them, right? That's one thing that we need to think about. Another thing that I would say the lessons learned is that too long that we have been thinking our political positions on left and right. Left being more liberal, right being more conservative. Now it could be more have and have-nots in a vertical. And maybe it's changing too. We don't know what the new paradigm would be. But I do believe one thing. Get rid of all that. And let's just have a simple format of forward or backwards in solving problems. And when we have that kind of mindset, I believe that we can make meaningful changes. But we're not there yet, but somebody should take the first step, especially younger people, because I believe they are very competent. They make decisions based on data, not based on ideology, and that's huge. We have enough data to make policies that will benefit everybody, and I'm counting on young people to take that action.
What advice would you like to offer Korean American second generation and the third generation young people regarding identity, leadership, and civic engagement?
I don't want to say to them, don't be like me, okay? I made a lot of mistakes, right? I think the most important part is, young Koreans, is you gotta be comfortable in your skin. You gotta be comfortable as to who you are, your essence. You are a unique God's gift creation. There's nobody else but you that look like you, that think like you, that acts like you. It's something there's only one of you, very unique, special, So be comfortable and have confidence in yourself. That has to be the foundation of all that you do. I have confidence in myself. I believe in myself, okay? And then when you think that way, what that does to me is, I think that will create this more motivating, more energetic, more invigorating self, where you are more active. Your mind expands. Your action is always there, okay? And when you display that kind of mind and real physical act, that's what leads to leadership, okay? That's what leaders do, okay? Leaders are not somebody who sits on the sofa and watching NFL game every Sunday, okay? They are out there working, okay? That's what leaders do. And so to me, that's very important to become a leader that way. And when you are a leader, you naturally work with a lot of issues, a lot of different issues, a lot of different people, a lot of different interests, a lot of different problems, whatever. And when you interact with people of various issues, that's what you call civic engagement, okay? That's what it is. It's a social interaction among people. And that to me is what we as Korean community or as a minority community or part of the mainstream, whichever way you think, ought to act and give our young people the advice as such, okay? Trust yourself, okay? Act, lead, okay? And then when you lead, you naturally become engaged with the civic issues, okay? And then most important part is this, and I've learned this over many years from business. People sell many things in business, right? They sell cheap, good, whatever. You know, mine is best product, whatever. But you know what? Nobody cares what you sell. People care why you sell what you sell. So when you act, that leadership thing that I just talked about, inspire people by talking about why. Not what, why. Why do I do what I do? Okay? Not this is what I do. No one's inspired by that. I think that's a very important lesson for young people. And there's a very great example of Wright brothers. The brothers who took the first to fly. Not many people know this history, but they had competition, you know that? The competition was somebody from Harvard University who got money, who got smart people, who got media coverage, okay? Wright brothers, they didn't have any of that, right? But I think the people who work for Wright brothers, none of them had college education. They didn't have money except whatever the money they earned from the bicycle shop. And certainly no New York Times followed them around, okay? You know, no one knew them, right? But I think when you believe in why, when you believe in dream, cause, you work with your blood, you work with your sweat, guts, everything. I think the competition, even though they hire the smartest people, I believe they work for the paycheck, okay, right? Not for the cause or belief, okay? In the end, who won? Wright brothers won. We didn't even know they took flight. Like 2 days after we found out. And then what did the Harvard people do? The competition, once they found out they got beat, they quit. So we have to know why is it that what I do, okay? Why is much more important. So let's teach our young people, why do you do what you do? Why do you study what you study? To make more money or to help the humankind? Okay, very important question. If you like the subscription, express your love by giving us thumbs up. Mana24.